You can call me cruel, but answer one question first. How long should a woman wait for a man who keeps saying that the future will happen when the time is right? I had spent 6 years beside Daniel, watching every friend around us move forward while he remained exactly where he was. I was not trying to humiliate him at the wedding. I was finally telling the truth. When I caught the bride's bouquet and everyone started cheering for us, Daniel only smiled and adjusted the cuff of his shirt. That quiet smile made me certain he would never have the courage to leave me. My name is Serena Vale. I am 32, and I manage public relations for luxury events, so of course I know the difference between patience and being forgotten. 6 years, 3 weddings, no ring. I was not planning to hurt my boyfriend at our friend's wedding. I only wanted to stop pretending that his silence was enough. Daniel had begun giving me that small, calm smile whenever he had nothing useful left to say, and I was certain it meant he would never risk losing me. Daniel and I had not always been like this. During our first year together, we created a private habit. We kept a small silver box on the bookshelf, and whenever one of us could not say something difficult aloud, we wrote it on a card and placed it inside. The first card Daniel gave me said that meeting me had made his quiet life feel larger. Later, it felt like being alone beside someone dependable. Daniel remembered every bill, appointment, and problem. If my car made a strange sound, he booked the mechanic. If I worked late, dinner waited in the oven. If I had a presentation, he charged my laptop and left coffee beside it. Those things mattered, but they were not what I kept asking for. I wanted him to tell me where we were going. I wanted him to look afraid of losing me. Instead, whenever I asked about marriage, he said we should talk when work became calmer. There was always another reason to wait. One Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before Maya and Joel's wedding, I found Daniel near the bookshelf with the silver box open. He was reading one of our old cards. I asked what he was doing, and he said he had been thinking about how different we had become. Then he asked when I had started speaking about our relationship as if it was something happening to me instead of something we shared. I heard criticism, not curiosity. That was Daniel's problem. He could turn one question into a quiet examination, then act surprised when I refused to be studied. I told him nothing had suddenly changed. Years of waiting had finally made me honest. He looked at me, adjusted the cuff of his shirt, and gave me that small smile. Of course, that hurt more than an argument. An argument would have meant urgency. His calm told me he still believed I would stay. I closed the silver box and placed it back on the shelf harder than necessary. He asked whether I wanted a proposal or wanted him to become a different man. I told him a man who truly wanted a future did not need 6 years to decide. Daniel said he had decided long ago, but deciding and knowing how to move forward were not the same for him. That answer was so typical, I almost laughed. He could solve a business crisis in an afternoon, yet speaking clearly about us seemed beyond him. I told him Maya and Joel had planned a wedding while running 2 businesses, so his excuses were embarrassing. His face changed for 1 second. Not anger. Something smaller. Then it disappeared. He asked whether I had discussed our private life with them. I said our friends already had eyes. That was not completely true. I had told Tessa almost everything. She knew how often I checked Daniel's desk for a ring box. She knew I had searched his browser history after seeing an advertisement for jewelers. There had been nothing. Tessa said I had made myself too available, and men only valued what they might lose. I liked how that made waiting feel like a strategy instead of rejection. So I changed small things. I stopped asking Daniel what time he would be home. I bought a green dress for the wedding without showing him. I accepted every planning invitation from Maya, even when Daniel expected us to spend the evening together. One night, he asked why I had become excited about everyone else's future while speaking about ours with contempt. I told him I was excited because Maya had chosen a man who was proud to choose her publicly. Daniel went quiet again. His fingers moved to his cuff. The smile came next. I counted 3 seconds before he looked away. 3 seconds. 1 smile. No fight. That was all the proof I needed. At the wedding, When the bouquet came toward me and the room turned to see what I would do, I would not protect him from the truth anymore. Not this time. The first time Adrian Costa photographed me, I was standing in Maya's half-finished reception hall with a roll of gold ribbon around my wrist and 3 vendor lists under my arm. He was the groom's cousin, 34, confident without looking as if he had practiced it, and he moved through the room like every person there already wanted his attention. Adrian asked me to turn toward the windows because the afternoon light made the green in my eyes look sharper. It was a simple comment. Still, I remembered it because my boyfriend had not spoken about my eyes in years. Daniel would have said the light was too bright for a good picture or reminded me that we needed to leave before traffic became worse. Adrian only lifted the camera and told me not to pose. The picture he showed me looked alive. My hair was loose, my head was turned, and I was laughing at something outside the frame. Daniel stood behind me near a table of place cards, blurred enough to look like part of the room. Adrian said the picture showed the difference between someone living in a moment and someone simply being present inside it. I laughed because it was accurate. Of course, I did not tell Daniel that. Tessa saw the photograph later and asked Adrian to send it to me. She said I should use it as my profile picture because I looked like myself again. That was how she spoke when she wanted to make an idea sound harmless. Tessa had been my closest friend since our first office job, and she had spent years watching me defend Daniel. She knew every answer he gave when I mentioned marriage. She knew how often he replaced emotional words with practical acts. When I told her Adrian had started messaging me about wedding details, she smiled and said attention was not betrayal. According to her, it was proof that I had not become invisible. I liked that word. Proof. It made everything feel clean. Adrian's messages were not romantic at first. He asked which flowers Maya preferred, whether the venue allowed extra lighting, and what time the bridal party would arrive. Then the questions changed. He wanted to know why I always looked serious beside Daniel. He asked whether Daniel ever took pictures of me. When I said my boyfriend hated cameras, Adrian said men often called things unnecessary when they were afraid they could not do them well. I did not answer for 11 minutes. Then I wrote that Daniel was good at many things, just not the ones that made a woman feel chosen. Adrian sent a photograph from the reception hall. In it, Daniel was checking the emergency exit with the venue manager while everyone else drank champagne. Adrian said that even at a wedding, my boyfriend looked as if he were preparing for a fire inspection. I laughed so loudly that Maya turned from the flower table and looked at me. She did not ask what was funny. Her mouth tightened for 1 second, and then she returned to arranging roses. I decided she was stressed. Brides always become sensitive near the wedding. That evening, Adrian sent me the photograph of myself by the windows. It arrived after midnight. Daniel was already in bed, but I left the bedroom and stood on the balcony to answer. 2 messages, 4 minutes, 1 saved photograph. Nothing serious. When I came back inside, Daniel was sitting against the headboard with the lamp on. He asked why I needed privacy to discuss wedding flowers. His voice was calm, but this time he named the exact moment. He said I had carried my phone out of the room the second Adrian's name appeared on the screen. I told him he was turning a normal conversation into something dirty because he finally understood that another man enjoyed speaking to me. Daniel asked whether I enjoyed making him compete. I said there was no competition because Adrian noticed things without being taught. My boyfriend looked down at his hands. Then he adjusted the cuff of the shirt he had not taken off yet, although it was almost 1 a.m. That small smile appeared again. I took it as confirmation that he had no answer. Daniel said he was not asking me to stop helping with the wedding. He only wanted me to be honest about what I was looking for. I told him I was looking for basic attention, and if that frightened him, the problem belonged to him. He turned off the lamp. The next morning, he made coffee for only himself. That was new. I watched him carry the cup toward the window and asked whether he planned to punish me with silence. He said he was trying not to say something he could not take back. I heard drama. Daniel always made restraint look like moral superiority. I told Tessa about the argument, and she said my boyfriend was finally nervous. She sounded pleased. Her excitement made me feel safer, so I began answering Adrian faster. At the rehearsal dinner, he pulled out the chair beside him before Daniel reached the table. I sat there because refusing would have made the moment strange. Daniel took the seat across from us. He spoke little, while Adrian told stories about photographing famous people and traveling for work. Whenever Adrian asked me a question, he held my gaze long enough for Daniel to notice. I made sure Daniel did. Halfway through dinner, I saw him speaking near the entrance with Evelyn Shaw, the director of a new luxury venue I had been trying to secure as a client for months. Evelyn touched Daniel's arm when she greeted him and thanked him for something I could not hear. She knew his name. She also introduced him to two men from her company as if they should know him too. The picture did not fit the life I had built around him, so I corrected it in my mind. Daniel had probably solved one of their boring operational problems. That was what he did. He entered important rooms through the service door, fixed something invisible, and left without becoming important himself. When he returned to the table, I asked how he knew Evelyn. He said they had worked together for some time. I waited for more, but he only adjusted his cuff and smiled. Of course, he made even that sound small. So I let it stay small. The wedding was 5 days away, and I had already decided exactly where I would stand when Maya threw the bouquet. The wedding took place at a private estate outside the city, where white roses covered the stone entrance, and every glass table reflected the afternoon sun. Maya had chosen soft music for the ceremony, but by the time dinner ended, the band was louder, the champagne was moving quickly, and everyone had started acting as if happiness were contagious. I wore the green dress without showing Daniel first. It fitted exactly as I wanted, close enough to make people look but elegant enough that no one could accuse me of trying too hard. Adrian photographed me near the garden wall before the ceremony. He said the dress was dangerous in the right way, and I laughed while Daniel stood several steps behind us holding my coat. Of course, my boyfriend said nothing about how I looked. He only asked whether the thin shoes would hurt my feet later. That was Daniel. I could enter a room and make 20 people turn their heads, and he would worry about the distance between the ballroom and the parking lot. During dinner, Adrian kept finding reasons to come near our table. He brought me champagne, although servers were everywhere. He showed me photographs on his camera and leaned close enough that Daniel could see how comfortable we had become. My boyfriend watched him once, then adjusted his cuff and gave that small, calm smile. I counted it. 1 glance. 2 fingers against the cuff. 3 seconds of silence. He was already giving up, and we had not even reached dessert. Tessa sat beside me and whispered that Daniel finally looked worried. I told her he looked the same as always, but I liked hearing it. Maya noticed Adrian standing too close and asked him to photograph the older relatives instead. She spoke lightly, yet her eyes stayed on me. I decided she was being protective of the schedule. It was her wedding, and brides wanted control. I understood that better than anyone. After the first dance, Daniel asked if we could step outside for a moment. We stood beneath a row of small lights near the side terrace while music pressed through the open doors. He said he did not want to argue at Maya and Joel's wedding. He only wanted to know whether I planned to spend the whole evening using Adrian to make a point. I told him the fact that he saw normal attention as a weapon proved how little attention he had given me. Daniel said Adrian was not the issue. He said the issue was the way I kept checking whether he was watching. That landed too close, so I smiled and asked why he suddenly cared. For 6 years, he had taught me that calm was more important than passion. Now he wanted to complain because another man could make me laugh. Daniel looked toward the ballroom. Through the glass doors, I could see Adrian speaking with Tessa and turning his camera in our direction. My boyfriend asked if I still wanted to be with him. I told him that was the wrong question. The correct question was why he had waited until another man noticed me before acting interested. Daniel said he had been asking for honesty, not performing interest. His voice remained low. No anger, no demand. Just that careful tone he used when he wanted to stand above the mess instead of entering it. I told him we should return before people started wondering why he had pulled me away. That ended the conversation because I wanted it to. When we went back inside, Adrian raised his glass to me. Tessa smiled. Daniel took his seat beside Joel and spoke to him quietly for several minutes. I assumed he was explaining our argument and making himself look reasonable. Let him. I knew the room better than he did. Later, Maya changed into a shorter dress and gathered the unmarried women near the dance floor. I almost stayed beside my table. Almost. Then Tessa caught my wrist and pulled me into the group. She said it was finally my turn. Everyone laughed, including me. I stood near the edge at first, pretending the game meant nothing. Daniel was across the room beside Joel. Adrian was close to the DJ booth with his camera raised. The bouquet went up. White roses spun beneath the lights. Several women reached for it, but it came toward my side, and I stepped forward without thinking. My hands closed around the stems against my chest. The room exploded. People clapped. Someone shouted that Daniel and I would be next. Another guest called for my boyfriend to get on one knee. Maya covered her mouth and laughed. Joel pointed toward Daniel. Every face turned to him. Daniel placed one hand inside his jacket. For 1 second, the room became quiet inside my head. His hand stayed there. The shape of his arm changed beneath the fabric. A ring. The thought came fast and sharp. If he proposed now, I would become exactly what everyone already believed I was. The grateful woman who had waited 6 years for a man to finally make a decision. They would clap. They would call it romantic. No one would ask how many nights I had spent wondering why I was not enough. I lifted the bouquet above my shoulder and laughed. Then I told everyone that there would be no next wedding for us because I would never marry my boyfriend. A few people laughed with me, uncertain. I pointed toward Daniel and repeated that I meant never with him. The sound disappeared from the room in pieces. Tessa's laugh continued for 1 second too long. Maya stopped smiling. Joel lowered his hand. Adrian did not lower the camera. Daniel slowly removed his hand from his jacket. Nothing was in it now. He looked at me across the dance floor, adjusted his cuff, and smiled. I read that smile as surrender. I held the bouquet higher because I wanted everyone to understand that I had finally won. Daniel did not argue with me in the ballroom. That made the silence around us worse. He walked to Maya and Joel, congratulated them again, then placed a white envelope beside their wedding book. Maya said something to him that I could not hear. Daniel touched her shoulder, shook Joel's hand, and left through the side doors without looking back at me. I expected the room to breathe again once he was gone, but it did not. The band started another song, and people returned to their tables in small groups. Nobody told me I had done anything wrong. That was important. If they truly thought I had crossed a line, someone would have said it. Instead, they avoided the subject because honesty makes people uncomfortable. Adrian was still holding his camera. I asked whether he had captured my bouquet catch, and he said he had recorded the whole thing. His answer should have pleased me. I had wanted the moment seen. Still, I asked him not to post anything until I approved it. He nodded, but his smile was thinner than before. Tessa came close and said I had certainly made my point. She did not call me brave this time. I told her Daniel needed a public truth because private conversations had failed for 6 years. Tessa agreed, though she was already looking across the room for someone else to speak with. 2 minutes later, she joined a group near the bar and did not return. I stayed until the final dance. Adrian danced with me once, but he kept looking toward Joel, who had stopped speaking to him. Maya hugged every guest near the exit. When I reached her, she held my arms instead of embracing me. She asked whether I had known Daniel was planning something that night. I told her my boyfriend had been planning to delay our future for another year, like always. Maya looked past me toward the empty drive and said that was not what she meant. I asked her to explain, but Joel called her name before she could answer. She stepped away. I decided she was emotional because her wedding had ended. At home, the apartment was dark except for the lamp beside the bookshelf. Daniel was sitting on the sofa with the silver box open in front of him. Our old cards were spread across the coffee table in careful rows. He had removed his jacket, but he was still wearing the white shirt from the wedding. One cuff was open. The other remained closed. I placed the bouquet on the counter and asked whether he planned to sit there all night, making me feel guilty. Daniel said he was trying to understand whether the woman at the wedding was the same woman who had written those cards. I heard judgment in the question, so I answered with facts. 6 years. 3 weddings. No ring. He asked if that was what I wanted the entire room to remember about us. I told him the room already remembered that he had never chosen me. Daniel picked up one card. It was from our 2nd year together, after an argument at my mother's birthday. I had written that our private pain should never become entertainment for other people. He read the sentence aloud in his own words, slowly, as though it belonged to someone else. For a second, the room became smaller. I remembered writing it after Daniel defended me when my mother joked that I would eventually leave him for someone more successful. He had taken me home before dessert and sat beside me until I stopped shaking. That man was still in front of me, tired, quiet, holding proof that I had once understood exactly what I had done at the wedding. The thought opened a door I did not want open. I looked at the bouquet instead. Several white petals had fallen onto the counter. Adrian's camera had caught everything. Maya knew something. Daniel had reached inside his jacket. I almost asked what had been there. Then my phone lit up with Adrian's name. He wrote that I had looked fearless under the lights. I turned the screen toward myself and closed the door in my mind. Fearless women did not apologize for finally speaking. I told Daniel that one old card could not erase years of neglect. He set it down and asked whether I truly believed humiliation was the only way to make him hear me. I changed my approach. I sat beside him and softened my voice. I said I had not meant to destroy him. I said the crowd had pushed the joke too far, and I had reacted because I felt trapped. It was a controlled truth, just enough to sound vulnerable without giving up my position. Daniel listened without interrupting. Then he asked why I had pointed at him and repeated it after the room went quiet. My explanation stopped there. He was not supposed to separate the moment into details. He was supposed to accept the larger story, the one where I had been lonely and therefore could not be blamed for the exact shape of my anger. I told him he was focusing on my worst 30 seconds because it allowed him to ignore his worst 6 years. Daniel lowered his head. His shoulders moved once as he breathed out. There was no plan in that sadness. No performance. He looked like a man who had carried something fragile for too long and had finally heard it break. Of course, I interpreted it as weakness. He asked whether there was someone else. I told him Adrian had nothing to do with us. That was still mostly true. Daniel said Adrian was only the person I had chosen to place between us. The words were too precise. I stood and told him I would sleep in the guest room. He did not ask me to stay. The next morning, my mother called before 8. Maya had spoken to her. My mother did not ask whether Daniel deserved what I said. She asked why I had needed an audience. When I repeated the same 6-year explanation, she said Daniel's silence had hurt me, but cruelty did not become honesty just because it was accurate. I ended the call. By afternoon, the group chat from the wedding had gone quiet whenever I entered it. Maya answered my messages with short sentences. Joel did not respond at all. Tessa replied after 5 hours and said she was busy. 3 people. 2 unread messages. 1 apartment that no longer felt shared. Still, I had the venue launch coming, and Evelyn Shaw had not withdrawn her interest in my agency. I decided that was where I would correct the story. Daniel could keep his cards and his silence. I would take the room back in public, the same way I believed I had lost it. For 3 days, Daniel and I moved through the apartment like 2 people waiting for the other one to admit defeat. He slept on the sofa without complaining. I worked from the bedroom and took every call with the door closed. The bouquet remained on the kitchen counter, its white petals turning brown around the edges. Daniel did not throw it away. Neither did I. Of course, I told myself that meant he was still waiting for me to soften. On Thursday evening, I came home and found the silver box closed on the bookshelf. The cards were gone from the coffee table. Daniel had packed them neatly inside again, but he had removed the small key from the ribbon tied around the lid. I asked why he had locked it. He said some things should remain private, especially after one person had decided private pain belonged to a crowd. His voice was calm. No accusation. No anger. That made me want to push harder. I told him he was acting as if one sentence at a wedding had erased 6 years of his silence. Daniel asked me to sit down. He said this was the last time he would ask for a conversation without friends, cameras, or an audience. He said that if I wanted to end our relationship, we could divide our lives quietly and leave what had once been good between us untouched. I heard surrender. He was finally admitting that he could not keep me. I sat across from him and told him the one thing he could not deny. He had made me feel alone for years. Whenever I asked where we were going, he gave me practical reasons to wait. Whenever I needed emotion, he offered a solution. He had loved me like a problem he could manage, not like a woman he was afraid to lose. Daniel did not defend himself. He looked at the floor and said that was true. The answer should have satisfied me, but it only made me angrier. If he could admit it now, then he had always known. I told him a man who truly wanted marriage would not need 6 years to decide. Daniel said he had decided long ago but had failed to make me feel secure in that decision. I asked what use a private decision had been when I was the last person to see it. He adjusted his cuff, although he was wearing a simple grey shirt with no jacket. Then he smiled. Small, controlled, familiar. I leaned forward and told him Adrian had shown more passion in a few weeks than my boyfriend had shown in years. Daniel asked whether I was choosing Adrian. I said I was choosing myself, because no woman should spend her best years waiting for a man who acted as if love were another item on a schedule. Daniel said Adrian was not offering me a future. He was offering attention without responsibility. I accused him of insulting Adrian because he could not compete. Daniel did not raise his voice. He only said that competition had never been the point. The point was whether I still wanted the relationship we had, not the public image I believed another man could give me. I stood before he finished. I told him he was too late. If he wanted dignity, he should have given me certainty before I had to ask for it in front of everyone. Daniel looked toward the bookshelf. His hand rested against the locked silver box for 1 second, then moved away. He said he would handle everything properly from that point forward. I laughed because it sounded like him. Even the end of our relationship needed a process. I told Tessa about the conversation while choosing my dress for Evelyn's venue launch. She had encouraged me to attend with Adrian, but her tone had changed since the wedding. She said the launch was a professional event and warned me not to make it about Daniel. I reminded her that Daniel had already made himself part of it by speaking with Evelyn behind my back. Tessa said she did not know what Daniel and Evelyn had discussed. I said it did not matter. I had the campaign ideas, the client relationships, and the presence Evelyn needed. Daniel had operational contacts. That was all. Tessa promised she would meet me there, but she sounded distracted. On the afternoon of the launch, Adrian arrived at my office wearing a dark jacket and carrying his camera. He said attending together would certainly make people talk. I told him that was the point. I wanted the wedding guests to see that I had not collapsed because my boyfriend left early. I wanted Evelyn to see me as confident and modern, not trapped in an old relationship. Adrian asked whether Daniel knew we were arriving together. I said he would understand when he saw us. Before leaving, I messaged Tessa twice. No answer. At the venue, the entrance glowed beneath tall glass lights, and every person I wanted to impress seemed to be inside. I checked my phone again. 3 messages, no reply. Tessa never came. I refused to let her absence change my plans. Adrian placed his hand lightly against my back as we entered, and several guests from the wedding turned to look. Maya was standing near the stage with Joel. Neither approached me. Evelyn was speaking beside them. Daniel stood at her right. My boyfriend wore the same dark suit from the wedding, and when his eyes reached Adrian's hand, he did not react. He adjusted his cuff. Then he smiled. I took his calm as final acceptance. The room had already seen me reject him once. Now it would see what I looked like after choosing something better. I had prepared a short speech about reinvention, courage, and refusing to settle. Evelyn would hear it. The clients would remember it. By the end of the evening, Daniel would understand that his silence had not protected him. It had only given me the stage. Evelyn reached the microphone before I did. She welcomed the guests, thanked the venue team, then invited Daniel to stand beside her. My boyfriend rose slowly, adjusted his cuff, and smiled. The room answered that smile with attention, not pity. Evelyn explained that Daniel had worked with her company for almost 2 years and had designed the system that kept the entire venue project alive after the first partners failed. The conversations I had dismissed as small operational favors had been meetings with the man who helped choose every major contractor, including public relations. My fingers tightened around my glass. Daniel said he had once recommended my agency because he believed I was talented. Then Maya stepped forward and said that recommendation had remained active until the wedding. She reminded everyone that Daniel had spoken with her and Joel during the planning because they had asked for his honest opinion after I repeatedly used their celebration to promote myself. Those quiet talks I assumed were about schedules were about me. Daniel reached inside his jacket and removed a small velvet box, the same pocket, the same movement. He placed it beside the silver box from our apartment. Maya said Daniel had shown them the ring before the ceremony because he planned to propose privately after the reception. He had not hesitated for 6 years because he did not want me. He had been waiting for the venue project to become stable so we could begin our marriage without debt and uncertainty. I tried to laugh and said he was using powerful friends to punish me for refusing him. Evelyn looked directly at me and said the wedding recording showed that Daniel had said nothing against me before I humiliated him. The sentence stayed in the room because no one challenged it. Adrian removed his hand from my back. When I asked him to explain what we were to each other, he said he had never promised me anything and had believed our flirting was only entertainment. He handed Joel the memory card from his camera, then walked toward the exit without waiting for me. I searched the room for Tessa. She was not there. Daniel gave me a formal 30-day notice ending our shared housing arrangement and said the remaining details would be handled in writing. A week later, I moved into a furnished apartment above a traffic-heavy street. My savings began disappearing into rent because Daniel had covered more of our life than I admitted. Maya removed me from the wedding photographs she posted. Adrian blocked my number after one message. Evelyn hired another agency and stopped answering my emails. Daniel kept the apartment, the clients, and the people I thought belonged to us both. When I returned for the last box, the dead bouquet was still on the counter. Inside the silver box, I found the first card Daniel had written, the one saying he loved how I could make any room notice me. At the wedding, every person noticed me. My boyfriend was the only one who finally stopped choosing me.